yeah, Brent Pry. Gonna apparently be the next head coach at Virginia Tech, guys. We kind of got wind of this yesterday. A little bit had trickled out. Andrew and I had talked about it privately here in the ESPN Blacksburg studio. I think, Mike, you may have been texting with us a little bit on this also. But Pete Thamel's reporting it now. It seems like it's going to be a done deal. Earlier this morning on Packer and Durham, Andrea Adelson was like, this might not be good for Virginia Tech. They can't seem to find their coach. And then all of a sudden, bam, the news falls. Brent Pry is where we're at. Mike, I'll start with you. I guess just kind of overall thoughts on this.
I mean, he's not the guy I thought that Virginia Tech was going to hire, but that doesn't mean he's the wrong guy either. There are a lot of boxes that he checks, right? He has coached at Virginia Tech before in the 90s. He was a graduate assistant under Bud Foster. I get that was a long time ago, but he does have some familiarity with Blacksburg. He is a really, really good defensive coordinator. I mean, Penn State's defenses, and Paul, I know I don't need to remind you, being a Michigan fan, but yep. Penn State's defenses are unbelievably good, and they have been now for quite some time. He coaches a really, really good defense at Penn State. If you want a guy to kind of instill the Virginia Tech ideals on the defensive side of the football and the identity of the football program, kind of hearkening back to the way Bud Foster used to coach, Brent Pry coaches a really aggressive attacking defense at Penn State. And that's something that's going to be evident, I think, in who he selects as his new defensive coordinator. They are going to the staff, I think, is going to be really important with this hire. Clearly, Pry is a first-time head coach. This is a hire that's not without risk. But again, there are a lot of things to like. Really good defensive coach. He is James Franklin's top assistant at Penn State. James Franklin has had a lot of success, obviously, at Penn State. A lot of that has had to do with the fact that he's recruited and out-recruited many schools on the East Coast and even more recently, most schools nationally. Penn State's going to have a top 5 recruiting class in 2022. This is a really good hire for recruiting Virginia. Brent Pry has proven that he's done that. He is one of Franklin's top recruiting assistants as well. So it's not only an on-field coach, he's a very good recruiter. If you look at some of the guys that James Franklin has recruited and Brent Pry has been the primary recruiter for on his staff, a lot of those guys are from Virginia and from Northern Virginia specifically, an area where Virginia Tech has not done very well recently under Justin Fuente. So I think this is an immediate boost to in-state recruiting for Virginia. I think it's an immediate boost to recruiting in general for Virginia Tech. I think the staff will be really, really important with this hire. Who is he going to hire to run the offense? That's my biggest question here with this hire. And then what is he going to be like as an overseer of an entire program? We don't know the answers to that. So this hire is not without risk, but on the surface, there's also a lot of things to like with this hire. It's under the radar. It's very Whit Babcock, like to make this hire a guy that nobody's really expecting that could turn out to be a pretty good coach. I know Penn State fans think very highly of Brent Pry. Mm-hmm. I have a couple friends that have gone to Penn State. I have a couple friends that have close friends that have gone to Penn State who have said the same thing, that Brent Pry is a really, really good coach, and they knew they were going to lose him soon as a head coach. Pry is in his early 50s, so again, a little bit older than Justin Fuente, certainly, but I think he's only 50 or 51. So, we're coaching forever now in college football. So it doesn't really. We all thought Brian Kelly was going to retire. He's 61. He just took a 10-year deal with LSU this year. So.
He can be the coach for the next 20 years, and no one will bat an eye at it. Right. Andrew, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, what's evident here is that Whit Babcock's not going to be pressured, and Whit Babcock's not going to allow the fan base to make the hire for him. You look back at our good friends over at Tech Sideline. They held a poll, and that poll was pick your top 3 options for Virginia Tech's head coach. A lot of candidates on there. 2,500 some odd voters, all TSL subscribers. Brent Pry coming in dead last out of over 15 candidates, receiving just 41 top 3 votes out of 2,600 and some odd voters. This is a guy that was under the radar, but at the end of the day, if you're with Babcock, you got to make adjustments. Like you said, Paul, Andrea Adelson said it herself earlier on Packer and Durham. This may not have gone the way that Virginia Tech thought it was going to. And quite frankly, when Justin Fuente was fired, or, essentially they mutually parted ways, but he was essentially fired 2 weeks ago, the landscape of college football in terms of the coaching carousel, job openings, looked a heck of a lot different than it did now. And when you have guys like Billy Napier, ultimately going to Florida, when you have guys like Dave Clawson, who may never have truly been interested in the first place, that could have been some agent work trying to get him a long-term extension at Wake Forest. That obviously eventually happened. When you have guys like Matt Campbell at Iowa State that are either A, content staying put in Ames, Iowa, or B, using the job openings that are going to come as a result of the turbulence that'll result from Notre Dame, of LSU, of coaching spots that are going to open up. Virginia Tech just quite frankly wasn't on that 1A list. So It comes down to fit. And Whit Babcock stressed in the press conference that head coaching experience was going to be a factor. His track record across all sports would suggest that is usually what is at top of mind for him when making one of these hires. But at the end of the day, he looked at the fit. He said recruiting in the area is going to be a big factor. And like Mike mentioned, not just recruiting future pros in general, like Micah Parsons, but guys like Devin Ford, guys like Yeser Gross-Matos, who was a second-round pick for the Carolina Panthers just a few years ago. Guys like Shaka Toney, who ultimately ended up in the NFL. Brent Pry has been one of the premier figures on the recruiting trail in the Mid-Atlantic for the better part of the last 5 years. And if you hate this, I ask you a question. What would you have thought of Charles Huff? Because the difference essentially between Charles Huff and Brent Pry is 1 7-5 season at Marshall University.
Bingo.